Hey everybody, this is Dolphin Radio with an impromptu stream here with Egglord the Nosferatu, and we're going to be talking about the language of the left and the barriers between the left and the right that keep us from useful, constructive communication. Welcome to the show, Eggman.
Hey, Dolphin. Um, uh, I'll be honest, this is actually a topic I've been kind of thinking about for a while, because there is a serious disconnect between the two ideologies, so to speak. A lot of people, they can't necessarily wrap their head around the decidedly esoteric language that the intersectionalists use, and that the left has been using by and large, kind of.
They've been adopting it, I've noticed.
Yeah, they've been adopting it, yeah.
And it's very strange, like the intersectionalist, if anybody's ever seen that movie Snatch, there's a group of people in there, they're Irish gypsies. And
yeah, the pikers.
And they're called pikeys, and you cannot understand a word they say. And somebody at one point early in the movie says they do this because they haggle. They're big hagglers. They're traders. So they're always trying to get the best deal. And by not really understanding what you're agreeing to, they're always ripping you off. And I think that's kind of, when I hear intersectionalists speaking to me, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing a con artist talk. And it's like, I'm going to redefine these words. I'm going to redefine these languages. And not only am I going to redefine my speech, but I'm going to redefine yours as well. So you can say whatever you like, and I'm just going to put the definitions and interpretations on it as I see fit.
Yeah, in many ways, that is kind of what they're doing. On top of one of the major complaints I have, especially having been having been a Marxist, is that it's a very academic language that they use. That also has kind of a weasel word sort of quality.
How well versed are you on etymology? Entomology.
Etymology, the origin of words?
Yeah, the origin of words, study of words.
Oh. Not particularly well versed, but I do have a sense of it.
I've always found it very interesting, and I'm very compelled by it. But
yeah, it's not something I'm ever going to formally pursue, but it does fascinate me to figure out where words come from, because language is a very important part of culture and decidedly identities. But one of my bigger complaints is that it's a very esoteric language that is very exclusive to people who receive college educations, and very particular college education. They go to these social justice courses to learn it, to these sociology courses, where they're essentially taught feminist and womanist rhetoric. And that's what it is. It's rhetoric. It's all very baseline. It's not necessarily well defined. It's an academics language designed to have very cloudy meanings. Sorry, it's hard to put this into words.
It's very
it disadvantages those who would not be able to afford such an education.
So in other words, it's like giving yourself an extra one up just because you understand the language. Kind of like secret code or something. Let's all write in code, and then they won't know what we're saying, and we can say, oh, well, that meant this. You didn't know that?
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's part of my... It's part of my big complaint, especially considering so many of them are not willing to talk to people who don't understand their arguments. because essentially this is an academic language that disadvantages the people they should be trying to reach out to if they really want to address the issues of privilege and disadvantage.
See, my biggest issue with that, though, is that we already have a language, and like the English language is, I think, 3 times bigger than the next biggest language. We have like 600,000 words, I think. And each one of them has a unique definition. Like facetious and sarcastic, they're very similar, but facetious has malice, sarcasm does not have malice.
Yeah.
You know, they're very distinct differences.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand why in a language with 600,000 words that you have to come up with whole new words or redefine existing words. You know, when we already have definitions, we already have words for them.
Yeah.
But I think that that's part of the plan is like, look, we're building off of language that most people think they understand. But as we're redefining it, we're able to kind of finagle their speech into what we want it to be.
Yeah, it's the argument I think that they would give you is that they're not redefining so much as they're reclaiming.
And see, I've heard this argument. That's why I ask about entomology or etymology.
Yeah, exactly. So to speak, they're reclaiming these words that were from the oppressor. It's kind of like the difference between nigger and nigga.
Yeah, it's the whole Tywin Lannister wear it like armor thing.
Yeah, and although again, it's not a clear redefining either, because again, referring to the privilege oppression dichotomy, there are no clear definitions of what qualifies or disqualifies.
So if you as a progressive believe that something is a privilege, then it is.
Yeah, there's no. You could essentially argue that anything is a. You could essentially argue that anything is a privilege. If you bullshit it enough.
Well, I mean, I could definitely see that.
Yeah,
I would consider growing up poor and oppressed to be an excellent privilege for gaining a lot of strength and character.
Yeah, yes. But you're also a white man, and therefore you have white privilege.
Well, I wasn't referring to myself. I was just saying that oppression.
I know.
You know, if you have enough oppression, then you have oppression privilege, which
no,
kind of turns the whole thing on its head, doesn't it?
Yeah, Oh, yeah. The your comment on your comment to Christy Winters, where you were discussing on your video where you were discussing the ideas of intersectionality and how it almost comes off like they're treating oppression as a social currency.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. It's not, I think, what they intend to do if they're sincere believers, but it's how it ends up being practiced.
All right. So our first asinine definition of this stream will be oppression privilege.
Yes. Oh, God.
That's defined as the privilege of having enough oppressions that nobody can interrupt you.
Yeah, exactly. It's if you're oppressed, if say you're a black man, black trans woman who is
disabled,
poor and disabled, nobody would be able to interrupt you in an intersectional space.
But that's a very big privilege.
Yeah, essentially, you would be allowed to speak your mind, and they even allow this to go to lengths that are decidedly extreme. Suddenly, they anytime somebody talks about it, like they're encouraging violence or saying they want to kill all white people. Oh, that's not bigotry. That's not racism. That's not class hatred. That is punching up. That is sticking it to the man.
Yeah, yeah. Even if that man grew up in a barrio.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter so much what your actual conditions are as much as what they perceive you to be. Which is kind of what the whole argument of white privilege is. As long as I can perceive that you're a white man, I perceive that you have this white privilege. You have this assumption. You have this assumption that everything will go your way more than other people, which is doesn't take a lot of fucking shit into account.
Yeah, I mean, just try applying for a college grant as a straight white male and see how many are out there for you.
No fucking shit.
There's like that one Milo setup, and that's about it. There are actually approximately 6 to 8 scholarships and grants where I live if you are a straight white male. And they happen to be the 6 to 8 scholarships that are available to everybody. You know, there's not a straight white male scholarship. You just like, if you're a straight white male, you could apply for these scholarships that anyone can apply for. But the rest of them, those are for here's 200 or 300 for women. Here's 600 if you're a minority. You know, they're all over. I mean, there's so many scholarships and grants and programs out there for anyone who's not straight white and male.
Yeah, there really are. They're not. Or basically one of the ways you could maybe negate that is if you converted to Christianity, but.
Oh, well, I was raised in a Christian home, but no, I'm not a religious person at all.
No, I think that's a dishonest way of doing it.
Dishonest way of doing what?
Of earning your way through college. Of doing a fake conversion. I considered doing it once, to converting to Mormonism to get into Brigham Young.
Well, you were you raised around Mormons?
No, it was more of a.
That was Wrath, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was Wrath and Tim. Tim and Wrath are both basically ex-Mormons.
Yeah, and I think Wrath actually has the Jehovah's Witness under his belt too.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned that. I think that guy had to have a terrible. I'm sorry for you, Wrath, man. That's so unfair. No Halloween. But back to language. Language of the right is a lot more straightforward.
Yeah, generally it is.
We like to use simple words, keep concepts simple, because I think we want to reach the most people in the most clear way that we can. We don't want our message diluted or misinterpreted.
Yeah, there's a point where you could almost say that the right is a little too
simple,
too coarse for people with more delicate sensibilities who are more comfortable with the
dancing around the bush kind of.
Yeah, with dancing around the bush kind of discussion. Suddenly, it's no longer as appealing to them, and they will tie all sorts of things like racist and misogynist on you.
See, that's why I'm glad I brought you in, because you just pointed out an interesting fact that, whereas we on the right might think that we're being simple and straightforward, it might be very well coming across as harsh, brutal, and just absolutely uncaring.
Yeah.
And in the truth, I mean, I've moved over to the right probably officially about 6 years ago. I started making the move about 8 years ago. And what I've noticed is that people on the right, it's not that they don't care. They care immensely. They really do. They really do. But people on the right understand that they cannot care about everybody in the world. So they generally pick one or two things that are very important to them and focus on that. And they just don't have time for anybody else.
Yeah. That's generally the way it tends to be more of an individualistic set of um, more applying morals, so to speak. Yeah, there's definitely. Pardon my stammering.
No, it's all
Just.
right. We all used to smoke crack at one point.
I surprisingly have done very few illicit drugs.
As have I. I'm pretty much a virgin in a lot of fields.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I had my heyday of pot. I don't remember it, but I know it was there. And I quit drinking about 5 years ago. I don't really drink that much. You know.
Yeah, that one kind of that can be a little harsher than doing weed. Um, but
I
one
was
of
never a
the
very good drunk anyway. I mean,
no.
I was like 2 beers in, and I'm sleeping in the car waiting for everybody to leave the bar. I was a bad drunk, man. I'm just not good at it. I have no
Uh,
drinking skills, and that's why I'm a beer snob, and that's probably why Wizard of Cos makes fun of me every time we talk. Like, you're not a beer snob, you just think you are.
uh, that's that's awesome. I'm sorry, but to backtrack a little bit, the esoteric language. That's another thing that kind of thought came into my head here. Something that definitely turned my stomach when I was sort of in the deprogramming stages. Um, I actually went and pursued literature addressing the complexities of this so-called white privilege of, sometime I went looking for articles where they tried to acknowledge that perhaps there might be a lack of privilege somewhere. And generally, when this wasn't an individual who often was talked down by more dogmatic feminists, it was a really obscure academic paper that was littered with this sort of academic language that really is not available or readily decipherable to the common person of more plain speech. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. In
It was
other
one
words,
of
it's like pure jargon.
yes, yeah. It's gobbledygook. It's there is an intent behind it. You can tell that there's some specific meaning that they're pointing at. But God, it's a fucking headache to to pick apart what the hell they mean. And so many of these terms are overly broad. It's why I really dislike the that's why I really dislike the entire fucking philosophy, because they're not specific. They really they just
Well, let me ask
cover
let me ask
it.
you this.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that this jargon, this language that they
Mhm.
regularly throw out, which is incredibly complex and has vague definitions, do you think that majority speaking, or generally speaking, that they understand what they're saying? Or is it like just a kind of like a mantra that they know how to make these words, they don't necessarily know what they mean, but they know that this is the argument that goes with
Oh,
that argument?
oh no! I think most people are just useful idiots that
So
are
you think that
repeating the rhetoric.
so they
That's
don't
that
necessarily understand what it is that they're saying.
they
They're
don't
just
understand the full implication. No,
okay.
um, it's not quite brainwashing. It's more like I'm giving you a watered down version and a couple phrases to repeat.
And if you believe in equality,
excusing your moral indignation. This is a very obscure topic. That's why I pause so much during this.
It's hard to find the right words because we're talking about words. So
yeah, this is something stoners do, for fuck's sake.
Maybe we need to go back about 7 or 8 years, get this party started the right way.
I know. Oh man.
Yeah, I definitely, when I hear a lot of, especially the younger people that are throwing these words at me, and they'll say, like, and it's funny because you'll even see feminists come down on them and be like, you know, that's not what that means, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
They won't do it publicly. It's always on a private level, and then, you know, the person who is shamed will come out and bitch, and you get to see the reaction to the private shaming. So you kind of got to just guess what happens.
Yeah,
but
they'll usually put their tail between their legs and say sorry.
Well, yeah, to the feminists
in the most pathetic way possible.
Yeah, kind of like that girl tipping $20. Oh my god.
Yeah,
that was embarrassing to watch, man. I felt so bad for that barista.
They also lord this fucking language over people. As a general rule, they don't bother to educate anyone about their fucking viewpoints.
I've noticed that they do the whole educate yourself thing a lot and be like, well, why don't you give me a cheat sheet with a list of your terms and what you mean when you say them? Because I can look them up in the dictionary and I'll get a different definition every time.
Mm-hmm. And that's something I notice a lot of these really more cult-like movements will do. A lot of the Afrocentrics, the minute you try and question, okay, where are you getting all these sources from? Can you give me a citation?
Go look it up.
They almost invariably say, do your own research, brother. Like, where? Give me a fucking start. Nope. I have gotten into so many arguments where they just do your own research and fucking buzz off.
The funny thing about them is, I would have to argue that they're definitely not on the whole intersectionality kick, because if they were, they wouldn't claim to be kings, knowing that would immediately discount them from all oppression.
Well, no, I don't think that they really believe in it. I think if they spout any of that, they're exploiting it. People like Tariq Nasheed and Ghazi Kodza, they're exploiting that language. They don't believe it. They have their own ideologies, their own agendas.
So they're far from the intersectionalist, or they're just kind of piggybacking off the nonsense?
They're piggybacking off of it.
Okay.
I think a lot of the intersectionalists are just guilty white people trying to get rid of their guilt and find this quick way to earn some sort of salvation from their original sin. So they basically leave themselves in a very submissive and abusable role.
Well, is it the original sin that they're upset about, or do you think that maybe they're just deep down they really are racist and they're afraid, you know, that it's going to show, and so they have to make up for it? You know, deep down they really are bigoted.
There is a very good argument for that.
I wouldn't say it all, because I see it going in different ways with different people. Like I see that woman that was tipping the other day. You can tell that this woman has, on several occasions, looked at a black person and stared down at her shoes and been like, I hope they didn't see me looking. Hope they didn't see me looking, because I was judging them. You know, and you get the idea that this woman has very, very racist thoughts go through her head on a regular basis, and she feels like she needs to you know,
Yeah,
propitiate herself before every black person she sees, so that they don't find out what's really in her head.
exactly. It's or to somehow repent for what they think in their head because they've, in a sense, they believe it and they're not able to live up to it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think a lot of these people have probably have a number of neurological disorders or maybe conditioned responses that make them think this way, and they feel bad for that. It's the same problem you get with people who have irrational fears. They know that it's wrong, they just can't fix it.
Or like somebody in the middle of a panic attack can't calm down, even though
Yeah,
that they know that there's nothing wrong.
yeah, exactly. It's a conditioned response almost. So there is a bit of truth to what some of the SJWs are saying. There is a conditioning that they perhaps are feeding off of there, that they are not feeding off of, that they're pointing to, that is existent, but at the same time is probably not the fucking systemic problem that they really seem deludedly think it is.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite intersectional words, systemic.
Systemic.
It's look, do you know what systemic really means, do you?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's okay. Systemic means that there are systems in place that enforce these ideologies, that enforce these ideas, that there are laws in place, that there are mechanisms within state-run organizations and shit. For it to be systemic, it has to be almost a legal construct. It can't just be a purely cultural or social phenomenon for it to be systemic. That might does that make sense?
yeah, no, I totally get it. Like one guy yelling obscenities on the street is just another racist Trump supporter, but uh, police arresting people who have the wrong color skin, well, that's systemic.
Exactly, exactly. That's that. It's, and I think there is a big debate in the intersectional camps, because I have found articles that kind of allude to this, but they usually completely dismiss the argument in favor of their particular answer, which is are the problems that we observe, are they systemic or are they individuals within this society? They invariably decide, no, it's not just individuals. Those individuals are part of the system. Therefore, it's systemic.
So, in other words, under that theory, you could not fix a system from the inside. You'd have to tear it down first. Because once you become part of the system and try to repair it from the inside, you're now part of the problem.
Yeah, I guess you got a point there.
I mean, like, if you think about policing, for an example, you have an intersectionalist who says, okay, the police in my area are systemically racist and bigoted against, I don't know, Mexicans. And so I'm going to join the police force and I'm going to.
Oh, yeah, immediately.
And then immediately, as soon as I join the police force to try and repair it, I am immediately going to become a racist. I seem to have lost sound.
Yeah. Sorry. I had an interruption. But yeah, exactly. It's once you've once you've decided to participate in the system, it's almost like immediately you've become a part of what is the corrupting factor, even if you're trying to fix it in that from that. That's definitely how a lot of intersectionalists view it, if not all of them.
So what is the solution in intersectionality? Is it just to tear down everything and restart?
From what I can see, yeah. There's the extreme sort of Marxist revolutionary idea, and then there's this on top of that, which is an invisible struggle against your racism and your misogyny and your sexism, your ableism, all your cultural prejudices. They believe that you should just internally struggle against it constantly as though it was original sin.
All right, so you're a little bit closer to them than I am because I've been out for a while. But
Yeah,
do intersectionalists, the feminists, and people on the left, do they generally, I guess what I'm looking for is, do they recognize any kind of prejudice or bigotry other than the isms that they list? Like, can they say, if you were to say, look, you're being prejudiced against white people, I've actually had this argument, and they say, well, you can be prejudiced. You're not being racist. You're being prejudiced. Like, is it okay to be prejudiced but not okay to be racist? Is that the mindset?
that seems to be what. That definitely seems to be kind of almost how they excuse it, because I've never seen it in any other capacity. That argument of this isn't racism because racism is systemic. This is prejudice, and then you kind of can get into the idea of, oh wait, no, this is punching up.
Oh.
They're excusing it.
Okay, so you just it's more of a matter of just rationalizing all your actions after the fact.
Yeah, exactly. It's again, this is not something that if we were to present this to an intersectionalist, they would not accept our way of phrasing this, our way of discussing this.
They would need it reworded. They would
want it. This is not what the intention of it is, but this is kind of how it's put into practice. Would be, I think, closer to what they would find palatable.
Okay. All right. So
because they're very fucking sensitive about it.
So they're more concerned with the intention. As long as the intention's okay, it doesn't matter what actions they take.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah,
the ends justify the means. So I want to end racism so I can go kill all the white people, and I've ended racism. Yay! I did a good thing, even though I killed all the people, tons of people.
Yeah, that's why you get all these arguments. Oh, let's just breed them out of existence and shit.
Yeah, that's not going to happen without rape.
Oh God. And then there's this is where it kind of starts overlapping into the Afrocentrism, which again I do think is separate and doesn't rely on intersectionality as a theory, but I think it piggybacks off of it. But it's hard to separate them because they do use that same sort of excusal. And I think intersectionality actually comes from an Afrocentric form of feminism, womanism, which was, I forget who one of the principal authors of it was, but she was this angry black lesbian who decided white women can't speak for me.
I think I saw a speech. Is she still alive?
I think she is actually, yeah.
Because I feel like I saw a speech in which either somebody was quoting that or it was herself saying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think she is, and she does get quoted a lot in the more obscure corners of it, I suppose. There's a lot of fucking writers in this group too, in this
world of feminism and
in this branch of philosophy. There's a lot of thinkers and writers.
Now, if you were to go into a library and find these writers' books, would you look for them under a letter designation or a number designation? In other words,
you're asking, would we look for them in nonfiction or fiction?
Yeah, that's what I was
We
going for.
we would most likely find them in nonfiction.
Wow, that's really upsetting.
Well, most books of philosophy will go into nonfiction.
Well, yeah, I guess it can be philosophy because there is no right or wrong in philosophy, just the argument.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's no outcome.
It's all relative in philosophy, including reality. There's no evidence that reality is real, except you know
That's not
what our
philosophy.
what
That's
our external senses tell us, and those aren't trustworthy, are they?
Yeah, that's not philosophy, man. That's quantum physics. Leave that crap out of here.
It's the same thing. It's the same stuff. It's all a cult, man.
Oh man. Yeah, I took quantum physics and quantum mechanics, and I'll tell you, quantum physics really screwed my brain up. It
Uh,
it really warped my perception of reality in a very serious way.
I think my perception of reality was already warped, and that's why I ended up really liking philosophy. I actually do remember sort of questioning whether or not what I was experiencing was real. And like I remember walking home as a child from school and wondering if I was actually experiencing what I was really, going home from school. And somewhere in the back of my mind, there was this idea that I was actually vividly hallucinating what I was experiencing and into someone's house and waiting for the cops to show up. This was
Wow.
yeah. I kind of have a fucked up fucked up mindset. But it's why I really like Philip K. Dick's ideas. So this is why I am attracted to philosophy. I already have that sense of I can't trust my senses.
All right, well, let me throw this at you to really screw you over for the next week or month or so.
Okay.
All right. So, two people born around the same time. They both get raised in a very similar manner. Mom brings them outside, points at the sky, and says, "That color is blue." And they go, "That is blue." And every time they look at something that's the same color, they say, "That is blue." Now, person A looks and sees what you and I perceive as blue.
Mm-hmm.
Person B looks and sees what you and I perceive as red. But all his life, from the very beginning, since he was born, he's been told that color is blue. And so he never thinks of it as red. He always thinks of it as blue. How do you know? And I don't want to get into colorblind testing and all this other stuff. I'm not talking about colorblindness. It's just perception.
How do
Just
you
pure
know
perception.
how do you know that what you're seeing is what you is
Exactly. Like the shade of green that I see when I say, okay, this is the color green. Do you see that and see red and in what I would perceive as red, but you've always been told that's green. So you go, yeah, that's green. And we both agree. Neither of us realizes that we're seeing two different things.
yeah, that will fuck me over. Damn.
Here's one to really mess you up. How do you describe color to a person born blind?
I got one for you. Imagine a new color.
I don't know if I can. I keep coming up with shades of brown, like trying to mix a gray in there.
I know you can't do it. That's if you've ever read H.P. Lovecraft, he has a story called "The Color Out of Space," and length about how this was such a strange thing because they only loosely could even call it color because it was something able to wrap their minds around when they looked at it.
It's I'm gonna have to go check it. You said H.P. Lovecraft?
H.P. Lovecraft, yeah, I've recommended a couple of his stories
For reading?
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to put a list together because I have been getting a lot of people telling me stuff and I just keep not writing it down.
Yeah, if you want one of his works that's humorous, although it's not necessarily thematic with his work consistently, you can go with Herbert West Reanimator. That one's I'm told is a little funnier, more funny than horrific. Hmm.
And what was that first one?
Out of space.
Color Out of Space. See, now I'm writing it down.
That one's creepy because he was describing this substance warping the landscape and the people and the animals. And he was describing this all well before we even had nuclear testing.
Yeah, it's bizarre. But, I've been told that there's no such thing as an original idea. My response to that is give a kid, any kid under the age of 5, a piece of paper and a pencil and tell him to draw you a shape with 57 sides. You will see an original idea. No guidance, just something with 57 sides. You'll see an original idea.
Nice.
It's just as you get older, you start thinking that it's impossible to come up with an original idea. So I think you just lose your ability to. But there's always intersectionality to come up with all these new ideas.
I knew you were going to have to break that around.
Yeah, I had to tie it back in somehow. Intersectionality, adding 200,000 more words to the English dictionary. Like, we have to learn all those? No. They're the same ones you already know. They just have new definitions.
So you have to learn the definitions we've given you and be aware also of the definitions that your oppressors are going to use.
Yeah, because when they say racism, they're going to mean discrimination based on race. When we say it, what we mean is the systematic oppression of anyone who's not white.
And this is how you fight against them.
Yes.
Redefining their words.
Yeah, what?
Isn't that basically doublethink?
Well, yeah, exactly. But here's my question. How long, and I want to ask the intersectionalist, I want to ask Francesca Ramsey. I want to bring her on. I want to say, Francesca, how long do you think it will take of you doing what you're doing before we can legitimately say that white people have been historically oppressed by people like you? Like, how long do we have to tolerate you doing this shit before we go, okay, we're in the oppression group too? Because that's what you're doing. You're putting us in that position to be able to claim oppression later.
Personally, I really want to argue the point of the history of Irish oppression.
Yeah.
I want to explain to her precisely how the Irish were affected by colonialism and are one of the few groups of white people on the planet to have ever experienced colonialism from the negative end.
Yeah, and they got it for 3 times as long as Black Americans had it.
Yep. Well, it depends on what culture you're talking about, because Islam kind of did the same shit. In point of fact, it did for almost 800 years longer, and they're still trying to do it.
Yeah.
Something that'll really, that's a really good. I recommend reading Hindu criticisms of Islam. They are going to nail it as colonialism. They literally say, this is the same shit the British were doing, and it was earlier and worse.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I can you really just linked it together for me. It is very colonial as a belief system. It is very set up your colonies, build them, grow them, and expand. It's an expansionist. See, I always got caught up on the word expansionist and never thought about the word colonial. But it is very colonial.
It is very colonialist and imperialist. They just were doing it before we had those words to apply to it. It's not so much a national imperialism; it's a theological imperialism.
Yeah, those are usually the worst kinds because they supersede governance.
Yeah. God has more authority than your government.
Yeah.
You are a Christian first and an American last.
It kind of makes you wonder, because the Egyptians were the first to set up what we know as absolutely know for a fact that they had a government before we can show anybody else as having governments. But they also had religion. And it kind of makes you wonder if those two came about at the same time, or if one came out before the other, and if they had sort of an arms race, like, no, you must obey God, no, you must obey the government. Yeah, well, we can throw you in jail. Yeah, well, we can send you to hell. you know, and just like back and forth until somebody said, "Okay, God wins. God wins.
There
We'll
is
just govern."
there is kind of a fact of there is kind of a feature of that of what you're describing. There's a to that with Babylonian civil or not Babylonian Sumerian civilization. I think there was a point where essentially the what was it, the first God King?
Darius.
Yeah, or not. I thought it was. I thought it was
No,
actually.
Xerxes.
I thought it was
Xerxes.
actually. I thought it was actually Sargon of Acadia. I'm not
You mean the
sure.
guy that got kicked off Twitter today?
It's not even Acadia, really, because Acadia is
I
actually.
want a meme that says that moment you wish Sargon was listening to your stream.
Yes.
All right, let me check this out. The first God King. Well, I know that Egyptian philosophy because I know Egypt really well.
Yeah, the pharaohs were essentially God King.
Yeah. And the funny thing about it is, if they lost a crop, he was liable. A lot of people don't know that. Like the king came with obligations and liabilities on top of everything else. No, they're listing the pharaohs, and then they've got they don't even have the Sumerians on here.
They don't have the Sumerians or the Babylonians or the Akkadians. Yeah.
That's funny. They have Romulus and Remus, which, by the way, are not Star Trek planets. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why they thought that would be a good idea.
Well, it's God. You've got a point there. The Romulus and Remus. It's actually quite debatable whether they were even real.
Yeah, I know. They're just mythical brothers.
Yeah, the mythical founders of Rome.
Who are apparently Trojans.
They were, they were Trojans who were
some of the only ones to escape, and they made it to Rome.
And there's a similar myth about the escape of the Trojan Brutus going to Britain and naming the land for himself.
Yeah, the land of the brute.
Brutan.
Brutan. Similar sounding country, Bhutan. Do you know about that?
Is that the military dictatorship?
No. Bhutan is actually if I get stuck anywhere in the world, and it wasn't the United States and it wasn't New Zealand, then I would pick Bhutan. It's cold as hell, but I'll tolerate that because Bhutan has actually a system of governance where they consider their GDH to be more important than their GDP. And GDH is gross domestic happiness. Literally the job of the government is to ensure that the people have a healthy, happy, productive life. And that's the way they see it.
That's actually kind of awesome.
What's really cool is like in that country, their religion is based around this great and powerful demon. And of course, in Asia, demons aren't like they are in the West. No, they're not evil necessarily.
They're powerful figures.
Yes, but this great and powerful demon who beat back all the forces of evil and saved the nation of Bhutan or something like that using only his penis. So if you go to Bhutan, there are dicks everywhere. They're everywhere. They're painted on the sides of buildings. They're in the artwork. The statues of dicks shooting water into fountains. I mean, the whole. And I'm not kidding. And they get artistic with it. It's like the end of Superbad on crack. I mean, they personify them. They got dicks with arms and legs. It's just crazy. Good. Check it out. Wonderful country.
Yes. That honestly sounds awesome.
And apparently it's also right in the middle of one of the biggest natural weed forests in the world. So
the land of the lingam.
They're all very happy there. But you can only get into the country for like, I think there's like 6 months of the year where you can get into the country, and then the rest of the time it's snowed out.
Oh, okay. Bhutan. I know why I was confusing it. I know what I was confusing with. I was confusing it with Burma.
Oh no,
Burma is a military dictatorship.
yeah, I don't want to go to Burma.
Yeah.
Also known as Myanmar, where that that thing, like, what was it, that tsunami crashed across it, and they like just left the bodies in the rice fields for months.
Yeah, okay. Poison your crops and your drinking water.
Well,
Sure.
it didn't matter because like the entire town will get wiped out, and there was nobody there to even complain about it. Yeah.
Okay.
And the government's so inefficient, and like, you know, because like you said, it's a military junta. So they, you know, they didn't realize that there was an issue out there because nobody came and reported it because everybody was dead.
Yeah, Burma is that's one of the few places where you actually get violent Buddhist extremists, from what I've read too. You know, ones that are not burning themselves to death.
Yeah, and I always thought that was a pretty powerful statement. If you're gonna burn yourself to death, then yeah, you might have had a point, and probably someone should have listened to you at some point.
Okay, we've gotten pretty far off track, and it's been about an hour, I think, now.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and call it. Like, there wasn't a whole lot to say on this. I just kind of wanted to get the ball rolling, and I wanted to. I want people to start thinking about the language we use, because
I want to get this. I want to start discussing this, even if it's on a small scale for now.
Yeah, just to get around to the point where people start going, "Holy crap!" You know, half these arguments can be won by simply saying, "Hold on a second. Let me know what you mean by that."
Yeah, clarify specifically what you mean. What is your specific definition?
Yeah, and skip the jargon. Use simple language to explain what you mean. And if you can't, then you don't have a valid argument. If you have to complicate your argument with lots of jargon, then you don't have an argument.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, that's the way I see it. Did you have anything else you want to throw on here at the end?
Not particularly. I think I've said most of what I wanted to.
Any nations full of penis art you want to talk about?
India has a large reserve of that. They call them lingams, but that's about it. Personally, I'd love to see Japan one day, but hey, that's neither here nor there.
I bet you it's really nice. I've heard it's really nice out in the country part, but you don't want to hang around the cities.
Yeah, I don't want to see the city. I actually want to see I actually want to go to the religious shrines, the ones in the mountains that that basically are people only go on sacred days or ceremonies.
Yeah, and like you have to walk through the haunted forest where everybody hangs themselves and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
I definitely want to go to that forest.
That's the forest surrounding Mount Fuji, which is one of the more sacred mountains in Japan. That's actually a weird parallel, because there's actually a mountain in the American Southwest, Mount Agassiz. It's one of the sacred peaks of the Indians, but it's also surrounded by a land that's basically bad medicines, where all the witches got banished to, where all the bad spirits lived.
Mount Agassiz?
Agassiz. Yeah.
California.
I thought it was in New Mexico.
It says it definitely looks like it's part of the Rockies, so you know it's on. It's in that Quinn State area. Oh, that's a really pretty lake at the base. Really bright blue lake at the bottom of it.
Yeah. All right. We should probably call this one a night.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on with me, Eggman. Thanks for shooting the breeze about the language of the left.
No problem. I actually was really looking forward to discussing this.
Awesome. So. Excellent. If you want anything in this video, I hereby officially, publicly give you full rights to.
All right.
And you can use it as you wish.
All right, I think I'll take you up on that.
All right, fair enough. I hope to see your video in the future. Anyway, guys, this is the Egg Lord Nosferatu and Dolphin Radio signing out. You guys have a wonderful night, and we'll talk to you later.